Hey guys, we're here in beautiful Salt Lake City, Utah again. We're not looking at the Magnum Peak. This is the 29er. Pretty excited to see this. The reason I wanted to have it as a prop is because it uses the same internally geared hub motor and battery pack. Really high power, very capable for trail riding. And what we're really focused on is the Metro Plus. So, there's a big difference between these two bikes. That one's definitely geared for off-road. It's a little bit sportier, more aggressive, forward-leaning, whereas this one, you've got an adjustable angle stem, a little bit of a rise in that bar, ergonomic grips, comfortable gel saddle, even a suspension seat post. This is meant for cruising around town, maybe going around the neighborhood or commuting, but it has that same powerful motor and very capable battery pack, 48 volt, 13 amp hours, so you can still, climb or get a little bit more zip with that throttle mode. I definitely appreciate this upgrade. Magnum has been introducing more and more models in the past year or so. We're in 2017 right now, and the Metro comes in two flavors. The Metro Plus, it's that diamond high step frame, although there is a nice bend in the top tube. If you just get the regular Metro, it's more of a step through, so this tube comes a little bit lower, sort of like the ladies frame. No shame in getting that, though, if you're a guy and you have a hip problem or knee sensitivity, especially with the rack. If you have panniers or trunk bag already loaded, swinging your leg up and over that isn't as easy as just stepping right through the frame. So anyway, I want to stay focused on this one, but Magnum has an older bike that's called the UI5, and it has that step-through design too, and it's $300 cheaper. So you might be like, well, what's the difference between the UI5 and the Metro or the Metro Plus? Well, the UI5 only has a 350 watt motor, whereas this one has a 500 watt nominal motor. It's rated up to 700 watt peaks, and they told me it has 90 newton meters of torque, which to me sounds kind of ridiculous because the high torque mid-drive motors from Bosch and Brose, they're only like 75 or 80 newton meters, maybe 90 in some cases. Hub motors aren't quite as efficient, especially for climbing. You're not able to leverage the cassette and everything. But on the other hand, they're not going to grind your gears. They don't require as much thought and sensitivity in shifting. So I feel like this is a really good, affordability approach, one that gives you throttle power because a lot of the mid-drives don't do that. And just in general, it works pretty well. Relatively compact, mostly hidden behind this 8-speed Shimano Acera drivetrain. Acera is 2 steps up from the base model Tourney, and Tourney is what the UI5 uses. So again, the $300 getting you a more powerful motor, a more, powerful and efficient, because this is 48 volt versus 36, a better battery, in short. Higher capacity. You're also getting hydraulic disc brakes, so that's a big deal for some people. You can adjust those levers and bring them in a little bit, and you just don't have to pull as hard. They're a little bit smoother, they feel very fluid, but these ones still have a motor inhibitor right here. It appears that that's only in the left grip, which is interesting to me. Usually it's like, do you want to have it in both or not? The motor's very responsive because they're using the upgraded cadence sensor down here. Very compact, it's not going to get bumped as easily, and it's just not as visually obtrusive as the older ones that had magnets on them. They could kind of get out of alignment. Anyway, it's fairly responsive, but it's not quite as responsive as a torque sensor or a multi-sensor like some of the mid-drives are using, speed, cadence, and torque. This one's just cadence. But the good news is if you're someone like me, you have a sensitive knee and you don't want to push really hard to get going, you don't have to. You can just kind of move your legs a little bit, and coming back to that throttle, you can just give yourself some juice at any level of assist. I love it. That's always active. But you do want to be careful because if you accidentally bump that while you're loading the bike and you haven't turned it off like we have here, the bike could take off on you. So anyway, coming back to stopping power, 180 millimeter Tektro hydraulic brakes. That's awesome. 180 millimeters is plenty. Coming back to the mountain bike setup that we've got over here, I think this one has I'm not sure. I want to double check this. Looks like 180s, same setup. And then this one's actually labeled maybe Tektro or Riga. I think it's the same setup. So they're just sharing a lot of the same upgraded pieces, but they're taking advantage of the commuter setup. This one has bosses for adding a rear rack, but it doesn't come with it. Whereas if we head back over here to the Metro Plus, it does. And it's a pretty great rack. It's rated at 25 kilograms, which is about 55 pounds. It has a triple bungee adapter built right in. And those little clips that I'm always talking about, you can add yourself a little basket or a trunk bag or panniers, and there's a bit of a block here. I noticed that the rack isn't quite as far back, and nor does it have a support arm down here to really give it that offset from the saddle. So if you're someone who's lowering that saddle really far, notice that it's gonna take up part of the rack, and it might even collide with a trunk bag. Not a huge deal. I think the rack looks really great and panniers would still work well, but it's worth talking about. It's worth considering. Same thing with this light. Spinninga Solo, it uses a couple of AAA batteries. It is not integrated. So you've got this huge battery pack, again, 48 volts, 13 amp hours. Thankfully, it is running the headlight. It is running your backlit display, the motor, but it's not running that rear light. So you come down here, press this little button. Hopefully you remember to do that each time you're gonna go for a ride at night, or if it gets dark, you might have to pull over, turn the light on, and then when you stop, when you get home, you need to remember to turn that off, or you're gonna run those batteries down and then it won't work next time. So inconvenient, but still a fairly nice light. And it's positioned out of the way. So remember I was talking about the saddle and the trunk bag? Imagine that there was a light on the saddle or below the saddle. If you put a trunk bag, it could get blocked. So at least in this case, it's gonna stay out of the way regardless of what kind of cargo you're carrying. Nice aluminum alloy fenders. They've got these mud flaps. Same thing up here at the front. There's a decent amount of clearance. So sometimes when I'm steering and really making a sharp turn and I've got my feet on the pedal, they collide. But in this case, I feel like there's enough room. And the wheels, these are more efficient. Okay, this is a 700C design, 28 inches roughly, 700 by 38C. The larger diameter lowers the attack angle. It gives you more momentum once you are rolling, and they're fairly efficient. I would call these hybrid, so they don't have that knobby tread like on the Peak we were just looking at. But they aren't so thin that you're like road biker where it's uncomfortable. They're striking a nice balance on comfort here. And coming back to those grips and the saddle, these are using imitation leather. This is a gel saddle, and the suspension seat post, even though it's kind of basic, is 30 or 40 millimeter travel, it's still better than nothing. It's better than rigid, so you get a bit of that full suspension feel. And then the Suntour NEX fork, this is very basic in my opinion. There's no lockout, there's no rebound, 63 millimeters of travel. It's great, it gives you enough comfort, but there's not that opportunity to say, hey, there are no bumps where I'm riding for the next couple miles. I don't want to lose energy and feel that bobbing or that dive. When you really brake hard with those hydraulic brakes, the bike's gonna dive just a little bit. Not the end of the world, but this is one of the places where I think they were saving some money. You know, there are always compromises on stuff like this. Visually, however, I love that it matches the rest of the frame. Sort of a satin black with the blue and gray accents. Also visually, you'll notice that the controller is external to the battery, and that's because this is a high power system, right? We were talking about the 48 volts. It's efficient, but it's also sending more amps back to that motor and giving you power up to 700 watts peak output. It also uses a pure sine wave converter, so a little bit smoother, maybe a little bit quieter. They're definitely paying attention to power and distance with this model, and I appreciate that. Also want to call out the little USB charging port on the side of the battery pack. It's nice that it's not down low where you might kick it, but it's not quite as convenient as if it was built into this display panel up here when you'd have all the wires just conveniently in one place. You might want to get a little right angle USB adapter or something so that your cable isn't coming out as much, it just kind of goes up. And they do sell those on Amazon and elsewhere. Little power button here shows you how much battery capacity remains. I think you could take that off and even use the battery as a USB like energy bank off the bike, which is cool. I happen to have the keys here, so I'm gonna try to unlock this thing like this. It is like spring loaded, so I do like that. It automatically kind of relocks. So anyway, pull the handle, tip the battery out. Yeah, it's like 9 pounds. It's fairly heavy battery, but again, it's high capacity, and that weight is positioned very well, low and centered on the frame. I guess that's kind of it, right? Like getting a close look. We have the charger right over here. 2 amp charger, not as fast as it could be. These days there are 3 and even 4 amp chargers, but it's kind of average in terms of size and weight and stuff. So, you know, got a little plug on the side of the battery pack here. You could charge it on or off the bike, which is great if you're someone who's commuting with the bike. This rubber thing doesn't seat super easily, so I always have to kind of finick with it for a minute. There we go, got it. And then in terms of carrying, it's nice that this does have a handle, something to grab onto so you don't accidentally trip and drop it. Let's try to seat this with one hand. There we go. Set it in at the bottom, click it in at the top. Beautiful. Take the keys out, make sure it's secure, and we are good. So coming back to just the overall aesthetic of this bike, you know, all black. Apparently in the future they'll have like a white one. We have one cable that's external here. It's the hydraulic brake line, and that makes it easier to bleed. Otherwise, a lot of the cables are tucked in and pretty well kept out of the way. Quick release on the front wheel, 9mm skewer, pretty traditional. 13 gauge spokes, so a little bit thicker, maybe sturdier, and I think there are 36 spokes per wheel versus 32 or less. So fairly well built, designed to carry the extra weight. The bike is a little bit heavier, about 59 pounds. It's not out of the ordinary for bikes, especially with metal fenders and racks and everything like that, and the bigger battery and the bigger motor. But it is a little bit heavier. So coming back to the removability of that front wheel and that battery, that's something you might want to think about if you're carrying this around on a car rack. The metal fenders are going to be a little sturdier and maybe quieter than plastic, but they do add some weight. And thankfully they're aluminum, so if they get scratched, you're not going to end up with rust. And then down here you can see they've got a derailleur guard. And I think the reason they added this is because sometimes the bikes are shipped. Magnum has a great network of dealers, but for people who live in these remote locations where there aren't any dealers, you can buy it off their website and they'll send it directly to you. And when it's in the box, this derailleur guard protects your derailleur in addition to the power cable for the motor, which is on the same side. So this is, you know, a little bit more crowded. There's more going on here. There is not a quick release at the rear. It's 11mm axle with nuts, so you need some tools to get that off. If you get a flat tire, it's a lot more work to do the rear. But thankfully, these are e-bike ready, e-bike specific tires, Schwalbe Marathon, and they have performance line green guards. So that's puncture protection built right in, along with a reflective sidewall stripe. So the fact that you've got a non-integrated, but still a light, a bunch of, you know, generic reflectors, an integrated light at the front, and the reflective sidewall stripes, it's really going to keep you visible. And I think that's important if you get the black model. It's something I think about a lot, especially if you're getting this to commute. Coming back to some of the other, I don't know, features on the bike, little extras. There's an interesting slap guard. I'm used to seeing plastic, but this one's almost a canvas. An alloy bash guard / chainring protector. And that's good if you have pants on. Like I wore these pants today so I could see, like, is it going to kind of protect it? What's it like if you're commuting to work? One of the big benefits of an electric bike is you could commute on a warm day like this without getting quite as sweaty. So you've got the throttle and you've got some extra support along the way. But then you don't want your clothes to get all messed up. So I like that. And I would even think about having another plate on the other side just to keep that chain from bouncing off. I have seen on this bike, actually when I came to start the review, the chain had fallen off. So I wasn't riding, I don't really know what the situation was, but it can bounce off occasionally, and then you got your hands all greasy having to fix that on the go. So at least there's a protector on one side. Pro wheel, standard 170mm cranks, Welgo alloy platform pedals. Really nice touch point. I like these because they offer a bit more surface area and good traction. The nubs aren't super sharp because they are not adjustable height. So you're not going to slip off, but if you do, you might not scrape your shins up as much. This has a square tapered bottom bracket, a little bit more basic, not quite as nice as splined or something that's like for mountain biking, but I think that's fine for a bike like this. It works out pretty well. It's available in one size, and again, one color for now, but I think they might be working on something in the future. Got the flick bell, tapered head tube, adjustable angle stem. So this is something, even without tools, you can lower it, you can raise it, and give yourself that nice upright sort of Dutch body position. That's actually my preference, just as someone who has a sensitive back and neck. You're riding around town, you want to be able to spot traffic and, you know, say hey to your friends or something. Oh, and if you wanted to upgrade this from the generic, you know, I guess it's not generic, it's just more basic suspension post. You could get your own, like a body float or a thud buster or Suntour. The guys that make that fork, they also make one called the NCX, and it's 27.2mm diameter. So that could help you out a little bit. Keep in mind that any of these seat post suspensions, especially the aftermarket ones, are going to add several inches. So if you need to get that saddle as low as possible because you don't have a tall inseam, just keep that in mind. That's one of the compromises. Even this one adds, you know, a few inches. That is, yes, awesome. Oh, and I'm going to complain about one more thing here. I love that it has a kickstand and that it's adjustable length, but I don't love that it's mounted in the middle versus back here because the crank arm can collide with it, right? And that happens to me all the time when I'm like, you know, getting a bike out, trying to back it out of my garage, and then, it hits the pedal and you kind of got to like lift the rear wheel or go forward for a minute or something. It's a minor inconvenience, but it is inconvenient. And that's a little area that you could think about when you're comparing models and stuff. At $19.99, I feel like this is a pretty good value. Magnum's been around for a while now, and as I mentioned before, they're introducing more and more models. You could pay the same amount and get this 29er over here and turn it into a commuter by adding a rack and stuff. And I think this one's designed to go a little bit faster, like up to 28 miles per hour. This one stock is 20 miles per hour with the throttle, but I think it can also be sort of unlocked and go a little bit faster. It depends on where you're at. So Magnum is trying to sell to specific geographies and of course abide by those laws. They're becoming a bigger company, and at least that's the impression I get. It's like, okay, you know, we gotta play by the rules. There are specific stickers that say like class 1, class 2, class 3, and I don't see them on this bike, but that might be something that they're doing in the future. So with that, I might hop on. I'm gonna show you the bottom bracket again. You can see the couple cables and stuff, but otherwise fairly well protected, and I like that the controller blends in. Okay, hold the power button for a second. Display comes to life fairly quickly, and if you press the power button again, it actually does backlighting. You can't see it because it's so bright out right now, but the interesting thing is that doesn't control the headlight. So a lot of times there's like a lights on off button. Some displays are always backlit, which can be a bit annoying. Bosch in particular. It's a minor gripe, but it's like if it's a full moon or maybe you have really good vision or something, you don't want the display distracting you. I like that this one can go on and off manually, but that's the same thing for the headlight. You actually have to press the power button on top of the headlight right here in order to get it working. And to me, it's nice that it's wired in, and there's a brake point right there. So if you really swing the bike, whoa boy, like that, maybe you're crashing, and the bike is getting out of control. Actually, that was perfect, because see how it pulled the light and the light's like misaligned now? It can break away. In fact, it looked like it was almost starting to break away without breaking the cables. So some of the older Magnum bikes, the cables could get messed up and you could have permanent damage versus just a little connector getting loose. And, you know, I'm doing this with one hand, but the bike is a little bit heavier. Like I was struggling to catch it as it tumbled down there. Coming back to the display, this is a monochrome backlit display, fairly large, not removable. So I talked about taking the battery off or maybe the wheel. If you're a commuter, it's great to charge the battery inside, but you leave this fancy display out, potentially in the sun all day or at the rack where it could get scratched. The more affordable bikes like this, they never have removable displays. It's something I'd love to see from Bafang or Das Kit, these Asian manufacturers that produce a lot of this equipment. You know, at least it swivels, and I think it's fairly well sealed. The button pad is relatively easy to reach, but you just can't take it off. So some people, they take their helmet off and they put it over and buckle it at the bottom just to kind of keep people, you know, out of sight, out of mind kind of thing. Anyway, there's a power indicator on the left, pedal assist level on the right. It starts in 1, but you can go down to 0, throttle only mode. Remember, that throttle is live. So, you know, if I hit this right now, the bike can take off on me. Speed in the middle, a whole bunch of trip stats on the left. So if we press set, it goes from time, trip 2, odometer. It gives you a whole bunch of feedback, and it's relatively just separated here. It's not overwhelming. I like the way this display is laid out. Battery management system, it shows your voltage, which over time you can start to get a feel for what voltage does the battery stop at, and you can become a little bit more sophisticated if you want. But for everyone else, there's just this standard 5-tick battery infographic, 20% increments. It's not the best thing in the world. I'd prefer a percentage that's much more precise, but you know, that's not uncommon in the space. And then those levels of assist, and you can go all the way through. So I'm at 0 right now. I can go down, and now I'm at 6. I'm at the highest level of assist. I'm going to start the ride off in level 3 and show you that cadence sensor in action. Remember, it's right there, really compact, out of the way. There's going to be a bit of a delay, but it's not bad. There we go. So I'm going to move my pedals. Beautiful, right? You can see it like delaying a little bit when I start and stop, but only a little bit. It's not really that bad. And to get started from like a stop sign or a stoplight, you know, you've got that variable speed throttle, so I can even just a little bit, just be real gentle with it, or I can blast it and go for that high speed if I want to. I'm impressed, like fairly quiet with those fenders. There was a little bit of a bounce sound, and I think that was actually the kickstand in the back bouncing. Okay, you guys, after all this talk about shocks and stuff, Corey and I were chatting, and it sounds like there is a little bit of adjustability. There's like this cap right here. Maybe you can explain it. What's going on here, Corey?
There absolutely is. On each side, there's an adjustment, and it just basically what it does. There is one on this side also. But what it does is it increases the spring compression. So as you increase that makes the suspension a little bit stiffer.
Okay, yeah, so especially for someone who maybe weighs a little bit more and you're like, the shock's bottoming out on me or whatever, you can increase the spring.
Vice versa.
Yeah, so no lockout. You probably get some help from your shop dialing that in. I'm glad you shared that, because I've seen this shock before and I guess I was incorrect about how adjustable it is. Thank you.
It's very easy to increase. I mean, you can even use a quarter or something like that, the way they've got it machined there. It's very easy to increase that, and there's clicks that you'll feel as you're increasing that.
Do you want to have them both like click the same number?
Absolutely, you want to count the clicks.
Okay, because this is a spring suspension, it's like a coil. Thank you. And both of these bikes are Speed Pedal X, so it's a class 3, meaning you can reach 28 miles per hour with pedal assist, and with the throttle you can get up to 20. That's sort of the federal regulation. And I think you can even get into the display and lower the top speed if you're someone who just wants to extend the range a little bit, or maybe you feel uncomfortable at those higher speeds. It's neat that it's very customizable. There's like a little password set up there. Other ways to extend the range are to ease into that throttle, and of course just to pedal using pedal assist. But otherwise, the efficient wheels, that's going to help. The efficient tires, relatively low drag compared to the Peak over there, for example. I just switched down to level 1. That's going to give me greater range, and it feels a little bit just kind of gentler, a little bit smoother. I like that. For some people, level 1 might even be like plenty. For me, it's working great. And again, that throttle, because it's variable speed, it goes all the way up. So I'm going to go up this hill here. Going 18.5 miles per hour. 8 gears to choose from. And I'm level 3 again. Very smooth with those brakes. I'm able to do it with just one hand. And look at that view. That's the Capitol building right down there. Just wonderful. Such a beautiful day. Last time I was here, it was snowing. Well guys, I've had a good time. There's a lot to say about this bike, and I think it's interesting that you have sort of an off-road version and then obviously like a commuter version using the same motor, the same battery. That makes sense from an economies of scale sort of perspective. These bikes share the same parts, so they can service them and honor the warranty a little bit easier, maybe even get to know the systems better than having just crazy like differences between all the bikes. It's cool that they're both $2,000 and so powerful. Like this bike, you know, I wish I had like a steeper hill to climb. I think it's going to be very capable. You might not be able to start from zero using that throttle. Like, let's try it out here in the grass. I mean, I think it's going to work fine here, but you know, right? Like, it gets the job done, but you hear it groaning a little bit more. I weigh 135 pounds, so it's not having to do a ton of work, but if you're on a steep hill and you expect this to just carry you up from zero, it might not you might not have a good time. So I think the pedal assist, having those 8 gears and everything makes a lot of sense. Yeah, that's about it. That's the new Metro Plus from Magnum. For the full write-up on this, including specs such as standover height, reach, all those other measurements I'll see you back at ElectricBikeReview.com. Have fun out there. Ride safe.